All right, let's dive into one of the most famous and, honestly, unsettling questions in all of political history. And it comes from a man whose name, Machiavelli, literally became an adjective for cunning, scheming, and cruelty. So here it is, the big question Machiavelli asked 500 years ago, and it's a question that just doesn't go away. If you're in any position of power, a boss, a politician, whatever, what's the safer bet? Your gut might say it's better to be loved. But Machiavelli, well, he had a very different take.
And there it is, the one line that has made this guy notorious for centuries. It just sounds so brutal, so simple, so cold. But what if I told you that this single sentence is just the beginning of a much more complex, and maybe even practical, argument?
Because while his answer seems so straightforward, Machiavelli's actual reasoning is way more nuanced. He doesn't just toss this idea out there. No, he builds this incredibly careful case for it, and it's all grounded in a pretty stark view of reality.
You see, the first thing to know is that Machiavelli wasn't some kind of monster. He actually starts by saying what we all think. Ideally, a ruler should be both loved and feared. I mean, who wouldn't want that? But he was a realist, a pragmatist, and he knew that in the real world, those two things can pull you in opposite directions. And when they do, you have to choose. His advice is for that exact moment. So let's really get into the nuts and bolts of his logic. Why does he land on fear as the safer option? Well, it all comes down to his deeply unsentimental, some would say cynical, view of human nature.
Okay, so here's how he breaks it down. Love, he says, is held together by this link of obligation. But because people are fundamentally self-interested, they'll snap that link anytime it's good for them. It's fickle. It's conditional. Fear, on the other hand, is held in place by a dread of punishment. And that, he says, never fails. And here's the most important part. A ruler's power should rest on something he controls, the ability to punish, not on the feelings of other people, which you can't control at all.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory for him. Machiavelli uses real history to prove his point, with some examples that might just make you rethink the whole idea of what cruel even means.
So meet Cesare Borgia. By pretty much every account, this guy was a ruthless, brutal ruler in Renaissance Italy. We're talking public executions, violently getting rid of rivals, the whole shebang. He's the poster child for a cruel prince, right?
Well, not to Machiavelli. In this incredible twist, Machiavelli looks at Borgia and argues that his so-called cruelty was actually a form of mercy. Wait, what? How on earth does that make any sense?
It makes sense when you compare him to the other guys. See, the leaders of Florence, they wanted to seem merciful, so they let one of their cities, Pistoia, just tear itself apart with gang warfare. Their clemency led to total chaos, riots, death, a disaster. Borgia, on the other hand, went into the Romagna region and used swift, targeted, and yes, harsh force to bring order. His actions, while brutal, actually prevented way more suffering in the long run. The lesson? Sometimes, refusing to be harsh is the cruelest thing you can do.
And he doubles down with another incredible example, Hannibal, the legendary general who absolutely terrified Rome. I mean, how did this guy hold a massive army of mercenaries from all over the world together for 15 years deep in enemy territory? Machiavelli's answer is blunt: inhuman cruelty. He believed Hannibal's ruthless discipline was the only thing that kept that powerful army from falling apart. His severity is what made him so revered and so effective.
But if you stop reading there, you miss the absolute most important piece of the puzzle. There is a hard limit to all this advice. There is a line that a smart ruler must never, ever cross.
And it's a critical but, because fear might be a tool, but there is one emotion that can turn that tool into a fatal weapon, pointed right back at you.
And that emotion is hatred. This is the one unbreakable rule. Be feared? Yes, but a prince must do everything in his power to avoid being hated. See, fear keeps people in line. Hatred inspires them to plot against you, to risk everything just to see you fall. Fear is a tool, hatred is fatal.
So how do you walk this tightrope? Well, Machiavelli's advice gets surprisingly specific. He says there are two things that are almost guaranteed to make people hate you. Number one, do not take their property. And number two, do not take their women. If you violate those two things, you become an enemy to their most basic fundamental interests.
And this leads to one of his most shocking and, frankly, cynical lines. Men forget more easily the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. It's an awful thing to say, but look at the cold logic.
A political execution might be seen as necessary, maybe even just. But taking a family's inheritance, their land, their security, that is a deep, personal violation that is never forgotten and never forgiven.
And so that brings us to the complete thought. It's not just be feared. It's this delicate, dangerous balancing act. Be feared enough to keep order and command respect, but be restrained enough to never, ever be hated. That is the real core of Machiavelli's radical advice.
Which brings us to today, doesn't it? Think about the leaders you see in the world, in politics, in business, anywhere. Are they feared but not hated? Or are they loved but maybe lack the resolve to make tough decisions? Machiavelli's 500-year-old idea still gives us this incredibly powerful, if unsettling, way to look at them. So, what do you see?